Greetings, ne'er-do-wells and evildoers. Today we're reviewing Disney's Villainous, the 2 to 6 player game where you will take on the roles of famous Disney villains and see who can complete their goal first. In this game, you'll take on the role of one of the 6 villains in the base set. Get that pamphlet, do the extra setup, take their special deck of not only their own schemes but heroes, and see who's the one who's going to come out on top.
Each villain will begin with their own unique deck of cards, as well as their own board, which represents their realm, featuring a number of locations on it, each location with its own special actions that you can take if you move your figure there. On your turn, you will move your figure to one of those other realms, so it can't be the same one you were on previously or at the start of the game. You must move to a new one, and once there, you will see a number of symbols representing different actions, and you can do each of those actions in those symbols one time per symbol. Now, some of the most common actions that you're going to find are to gain power. Power is the currency in this game. You'll be using that to play cards, as well as perhaps for some other effects. So whatever the number is that shows in that spot, you can get that much power. The other thing you're going to see a lot of is playing cards. You're going to have a hand of 4 cards at any given time, and for each play card symbol, you can play one of them into the area in front of you, depending on its type. So it'll have a cost in the top left that indicates how much power you need to spend in order to play it. And if it's an item or an ally, then those will be played onto your board at the bottom, onto one of the locations there of your choice. Some of them may have specific conditions as to where they can go, but you'll read the cards, and they can have all sorts of effects. They can help you take care of heroes. We'll get into more of that a little bit later. You've also got effect cards and condition cards, which are not played to your board. Instead, they are one-time use. They are discarded, and they'll have some kind of an effect, an ability, or a bonus for you to achieve. Condition cards are special because those are actually played outside of your own turn in response to certain things that other players may trigger. So that's something you got to watch out for while you are playing. You're going to see another symbol on that board, which looks like a cloud with a little lightning bolt coming out of it. That is the fate action. So each player has their own unique fate deck filled with characters from the movie or universe that they represent. And if you use that fate action, you choose one of your opponents and you will draw 2 cards from their fate deck, not your own, and you get to decide which of those 2 cards you are going to play on them. And this is a negative thing because this is a villain game and this deck is filled with good guys. You are trying to stop their progress. These could be effects that will have negative effects based on their specific villain and what their goals are, or they could be heroes themselves. Heroes are played to the top of the board, and they're sort of like the allies that you can play to the bottom, only they are not on your side. They have a strength level, and usually some kind of an annoying effect of their own, and they cover up the top row of those symbols on each space. So you will not be able to activate those symbols until you move or get rid of those heroes. Fortunately, there is a vanquish action you can take. If you're on a vanquish space, then you can attempt to take out those heroes using your own allies. That's where the strength numbers come into play on the ally cards. If you have a combined number of allies with a combined total strength equal to or greater than the hero that is in that same location, you can discard those allies, and in exchange, you'll get to also discard that hero, get rid of it. You don't have to worry about it anymore. There are a couple other symbols that you can use. Sometimes they'll let you move cards around to different locations. Maybe they'll let you discard cards if you're really looking for something specific in your deck, or you just have something that you don't want in your hand at that any given moment. But that's really the way the game works. You will move, take all of the actions that you can at the location you're at now, then the next player does the same thing, and so on, until eventually one of the villains is the first to complete all of their objectives.
Now, we mentioned different win conditions because this is where the game gets a bit asymmetrical. Unlike other games when everyone's trying to reach the same goal, each villain has their own goal that's tailored to them. For example, the Queen of Hearts here wants to convert her allies into wickets, then take a shot. If she's able to do the text on the card, she wins the game. Other ones, for example, Jafar wants to get Genie's lamp, and then Prince John just simply wants power because he's just a greedy king.
Yeah, it's super thematic. Most of it generally boils down to, at least in the core set, to looking through your deck. Not just looking through it. You have to actually draw it and hope that you get the cards or use some effects to be able to draw them. But there's usually like a specific item that you want in play. Maybe you want it at a specific location. And then sometimes once you get things set up, there's like a final bonus thing you have to do to complete your goal. But yeah, they all do feel kind of similar, but in the way that they are worked thematically, tied into their movies and their characters, I think each one gives you a pretty unique experience.
Yeah, rules wise, they all are very similar. It's just there's allies, there's items, conditions, and effects. You're just playing these cards when you can. But because the boards are different, it's not like playing a different deck. And for example, Magic the Gathering, when there's always the main phase, secondary phase, or this. Because these boards are different, you may not have multiple fate symbols, for example, but someone else could have a lot more. So when you're playing the character, it is going to feel significantly different than the last time you played Captain Hook, for example.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're familiar with the source material, which is probably the number one reason you're going to be playing this game is because you're a Disney fan. Getting to see those little touches of, oh, how Peter Pan moves around, or how in the Queen of Hearts board, the enemy, you can shrink or enlarge your heroes. So that's just a fun little touches like that. And the fate thing is also very important because that's really the major way you're going to be interacting with other players. That's your direct aggression towards them.
It is a bit more of a solo experience, even though you can play those condition cards that trigger depending on what your opponent does. I don't remember any of them saying something like, whenever your opponent defeats a hero, fate them twice. It's usually just giving you a benefit. So it's a little hard to
Yeah.
mess with your opponent's board outside of the actual fate action.
So that's definitely adds a wrinkle to it because for the most part in this game, you are focused just on your board alone. You're worried about completing your goal fast enough, but you got to keep an eye on everyone else because if someone else is getting close to completing their goal, sometimes, there's not really a way for you to always speed up your own process because just maybe the way the deck is coming out, you just can't do anything about it. You need more rounds to win. You have to slow them down, and that presents some interesting choices as to, well, when is the right time? Should I be focusing on myself or them? And once I draw those cards, where should I put that hero? Because you can choose where it goes, and maybe you want to block certain spaces they have because you know their objectives. So definitely, it's not like a super player PvP focused game, but there is just enough of it that you got to be paying attention.
I think that's probably great for the entry level game, considering it's connected to Disney properties. Maybe those who are a bit more immersed in many other board games, especially ones that have a lot more player interaction, might find this to be a little stale. And those fake cards sometimes they're not the greatest thing either. You can draw two and you can just get something that you can't even play, so it doesn't really even help at that moment. So you don't see too much fading going around until maybe the end. If let's say like the Queen of Hearts we have here, and we have all the wickets set up to about to take the shot, everyone's probably going to take a turn to fate you, mean you're going to get dogpiled with a lot of cards, or maybe not if they're not useful at that moment. Luckily, though, if you do the 5 to 6 player, there's this little fate token. And if you get faded, you get this token, and you can't get faded again as long as you have this. So, yeah, which is pretty nice because you don't want to get dogpiled by 6 people.
Yeah, that would be no good. And yeah, a lot of the game is really comes down to how well you're going to do, comes down to what's in your deck because, or just the random assortment of your deck because the card that you need might be on the bottom of your deck for your character to win. That like could happen. So, or it might be on the top, and maybe you need 2 cards. Maybe they're both like you get them very early on or not. And I definitely found that there are some situations where the balance might not necessarily be where you want it to be. One player might just have a huge lead just by random chance they happen to get the stuff they needed right away. And I guess the fate is meant to be in there as a way for you to try to push that off a little bit to mitigate that. But sometimes it is just it's obvious that this, I think, was first and foremost a game they worked on getting the thematic representations down for the characters, and I do think that the balance suffers a little bit as a result of that.
I see where you're coming from, and don't get me wrong, not having the card you need and having at the bottom sort of stinks, but there is a way that you can pitch cards, discard your hand, and when you drop to 4, you can get more, so you can go through your deck sometimes pretty quickly, or at least a little quicker. It's not a complete fix, but overall, for a game based on a property, I mean, 5, 10 years ago, we'd probably just get a reskin of Uno or something. This is actually a unique game that is very interesting. I mean, with asymmetrical different winnings, it's very thematic for each of the villains. The art itself, you look at those cards, look like some stills from movies, but not simply just copy and pasted. They look like they actually painted over it, so they all look very nice. For a light entry game, for a property that I think makes sense for a light entry game, it seems like a pretty good deal. Mirror, mirror on the wall, what are the crits and misses for Villainous?
Crits. This is a highly thematic take on the Disney universe with references and in-jokes for fans and some beautiful artworks and rendering from classic movies that you know and love.
Many of the pieces used for cards do look like they were stills from the movies, but instead of just copying and pasting them, they did treat them up to give them that extra bit of Disney flair.
All of the villains are asymmetrical in their deck makeup and their objectives, giving players a personalized feel depending on which one they're using.
While the goals are different, the rules are still the same, so you'll have to do a different strategy without having to learn a whole new game with each villain.
The game's rules are relatively simple to learn and teach, but not so simple that they're insulting, making this one a good choice for newcomers as well as veteran gamers to come together.
The Disney property is a very well-known property, so it makes sense that this game should be attractive to those new to the board game hobby, but not so in a way that is disappointing to play for those over the age of 5. Misses. Many of the win conditions require specific cards in your deck out on the field, and unfortunately that means you just have to hope you draw the right cards. As we stated earlier, this means you could get these cards early on, or they could be at the bottom of your deck.
Certain cards and abilities are there to aid you in your quest to find the things that you need to win in your deck, but at the end of the day, you are heavily at the mercy of the deck's layout when the game starts.
While there is some interaction with possibly fading an opponent or triggering conditions off their actions, this does feel like a solo game where everyone is just in a race to finish their own victories.
There's not always much that you can do to hinder your opponents until someone gets really close to the end, and then it ends up with all the other players dogpiling on them, trying to stop them before it's too late. I am a big Disney fan, and like you said, Will, earlier, when you get a licensed game from a property as big as Disney is, expectations aren't always the highest. We've had bad experiences with those before, but this is one that for a mass market, more casual leaning game with this theme, I think does it really well. I will say some of the specific villains included in the base set and their objectives don't thrill me. And based on what I've experienced from expansions, which maybe we'll be talking about soon in separate videos, I think they've done it better as things have progressed. But as far as just the foundation is concerned and how the game plays overall, I think this is a pretty decent start. And for most Disney fans who aren't super board game snobs like we are, I think they're going to be pretty happy playing this one with their family or friends.
Yeah, I tend to be a big fan of a lot of different properties and really want to see them into the board game universe. And I think this is a great entry for those who are big fans of Disney. It's not some quickly pasted on, copying the rules of another game or something. They tried to do something unique and different here, and also try to make sure that the characters of these properties really shine through. You do feel like, okay, this is the Queen of Hearts, this is Ursula. It isn't just like a deck builder where it's like +2 power or something. They're doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, not only, in fact, is this not a reskin, it's also inspiring its own reskins with the Marvel version that's coming out at some point in the future. So, yeah, I think it's successful enough and popular enough to have multiple expansions and even its own spin-offs in other universes. So that says something for it. I think that's worth recognizing. Take a look at Disney Villainous. It's available now, along with a few expansions, and let us know in the comments if you have experienced it, what you think about the game. Is it too random for you? Have you found ways to mitigate that? Are you a big Disney fan? Are you a big board game fan? And what villains, of course, we got to ask, do you want to see? I mean, that's something we didn't really talk about in this episode too much, but I think the core set has a pretty good selection of villains with some obvious ones that I think they left for expansions to make you want to buy those other ones.
What's nice about those expansions, though, is that you can still buy them and play with them without the base.
Right.
So if you just want to try out because you really just want to get Scar, you can do that. In terms of villains in the base game, I think my two favorites are Maleficent and Prince John. I enjoyed getting all the different curses and using them with Maleficent, but Prince John's simple and he just is greedy and just wants all that power.
I mean, I like Jafar thematically because Aladdin is my favorite movie from the bunch, but like a lot of the other ones, he's just kind of, search for a thing in your deck, which doesn't thrill me too much, but that's okay. The Queen was interesting and strange the way she works. She has some cool, weird mechanics going on, so talk to us in those comments. Let us know what you think. Until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was a Roll for Crit review.
Hey, go ahead, like and subscribe, and support our Patreon for even more board game content.
Support us now to hear the audio expansion, where you can hear all the other nerdy things we've been up to.